Um, Either way, it was on my calendar at 10, so
Okay.
I jumped in.
Well, I'll let
I can come back at 10:30 if you want.
it's up to you. You can stay on. We're interesting.
Okay. Either way.
Okay. Um, so I'll go ahead and get started. As of right now, I want to thank you all for coming. As always, like I tell y'all every month, I am extremely proud to be president over for professional technical employees this year. Y'all have done a magnificent job. I'm so impressed with the work that's being done, everyone collaborating and making sure that our students are completing their classes and continuing to be successful despite everything that is going on. And I think it's just wonderful to work for an institution that has so much support and does thrive on the success of our students. So again, as always, I thank you so much for all the hard work and dedication that you have provided to ACC, and I ask that you continue to do so in the years to come. Um, if please keep your phones muted or your microphones muted. The chat is there if you're asking questions. We have Lauren, we have Courtney, we have Cassie, which is the administrative assistant for the associations out there to answer those questions. Feel free to throw your questions in the chat, but please, please, please keep your microphones muted. That way we can make sure that there are no echoes and so on and so forth. As we've all experienced in the many, many webinar meetings that we've had over the last few months. I do want to start out a little bit, give you all some updates. The ACC Highland campus parking garage is complete, and I am excited for you all to see it. Courtney's going to send out a picture tomorrow on the APTE news so y'all can see what that looks like, but it is absolutely beautiful. Um, so that's exciting because we've all been waiting to see what that was going to look like. So that is done. I want to give an update also on the Chosen Name project, which is scheduled to launch out in August. As you all are probably aware, I sent out a communication earlier this month explaining what that project consists of. We do have students and also staff and faculty members who have names that they prefer to be addressed by, and they are our students first will have the option to make those updates coming next month. They'll be able to log onto their self-service and they'll be able to update their name to their chosen name, and that will be reflected in different areas of ACC. One of the biggest areas being the class rosters and on Blackboard. So be on the lookout for that. Um, Courtney, you can go ahead and do the PowerPoint. Thank you. So as you know, we have our guest speakers today. Neil Vickers and Dr. Rhodes will be we'll be asking some of the questions that were submitted through the RSVPs. So those questions have already been submitted. If you have additional questions, again, put them in the chat. I cannot promise that they will be answered today, but I can go ahead and get those questions forwarded for you all if they are different from other questions that have already been submitted. If you do want or have questions or concerns related to anything that you feel APTE can help you with, reach out to us, myself, or the other APTE officers. Our regular email address, you can actually look up in the directory, but we also send out those notifications each month, or I send out a notification each month. Courtney sends out one every week with our email address there as well, the APT_officers at austincc.edu. Please, please, please contact us. I do receive emails on a regular from ProfTech members addressing issues that are concerns that they have about things that are going on, that they're witnessing, good and bad. So if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us. That's what we're here for. The upcoming officers, Dr. Lauren Siebel will be taking the role of the president in the coming months, and I'm so excited for her. I think I'm more excited to become past president, though. Samantha Akers, she is our new president-elect. Communications officer will remain as Courtney Graham. She has done a magnificent job this year, and I couldn't have asked for more help because I'm not creative. So she has done a lot of creative things that I'm mostly appreciative of. Secretary Treasurer will remain as Paul Mason, and I will become the past president, which will help. I'll kind of help Lauren in the background if she has needs assistance and kind of guide her through the ropes of how things work. For 1920 or for 2021, we do have our new executive council. So I do want to congratulate everyone that has been elected for their positions. This is going to be a great committee. We have a great group of professionals that I feel will be successful in their committees. These committee members are actually going to be your representatives in the different areas as you see on the PowerPoint. And if you have any concerns or questions related to these committees, those will be your contact people. Also, they will provide updates on the APTE website in regard to any committee meetings that they attend. So it's always good to look at the APTE website to get updates on what's going on with ACC, the committees, and the things behind the scenes. I encourage everyone to become a part of APTE. I have been with ACC going on 7 years now, and I can guarantee you that I would not know about half of the things that I know now if I had not become a part of APTE, an active member of APTE. Depending on what your career goals are, it's kind of hard to venture out. For me, my goal is to become an administrator one day. So I need to know the ins and outs of how the college works, and there's no better way to do that than to become a part of shared governance. So I do strongly encourage you all to become active members of APTE, to learn what's going on behind the scenes, to understand how colleges work, what's going on, how decisions are made, how committees come up with items for discussion, things to that manner. This is a perfect opportunity for you to get involved and learn how things work. APTE website, go to our website, look at the different objectives that we have, look at how to contact us. In the coming months, we are developing the emergency loan and grant program for the employees, all employees. So you'll be able to donate to those grant and the loan program. The objective of the emergency loan program or grant program is to help our employees who are in need. Right now, we see a lot of going on with the CARES Act with the institution and how we're helping students that are in need. But this is going to allow us to have an option, a platform to help the employees who are in need as well. The grant, of course, is exactly how it's described. It will be a grant that's issued to employees to help them get through a difficult time. But the loan option will be a 0% interest rate loan that employees will take out, and it will be automatically deducted from their paychecks every month until it's paid in full. These will help employees get away from taking out payday loans, which are high interest rates, loans from your bank that you may have a high interest rate on as well. But this is to help employees get out of a bind during a difficult time. And I believe that this will be exceptional for everyone. And I think that everyone will benefit from this. So in the coming months, be on the lookout for more information about that. Right now, we are working with marketing to get a campaign going to start raising money for that program. So I do want you all to get involved in that and know that it may potentially help you one day. You never know what situation you may find yourself in. Go ahead, Courtney. Also, APTE does have a LinkedIn group. Courtney does do updates on the LinkedIn website. She actually just posted something not too long ago. I saw that come through on my newsfeed. So make sure that you join the LinkedIn group. That way you can get updates that way as well. Also, you want to keep a professional networking platform. That's perfect for that. In a few, we will be doing a Slido. So join in on that. We try to do something fun because webinars can be so boring. I know, trust me, I know. It's difficult for me to pay attention a lot of times. And some of these meetings, I'm just like, oh my goodness, would this be over? So I don't want to bore you all. So Slido is going to help me with that, with the assistance of Cassie and Courtney. Did any questions come in at all? No, nobody has any questions. See, I'll be trying to be fun and everybody's just like leaving me out to dry. Okay. Neil, I want to go ahead and get you started though, so you can get out of here if you need to.
Okay. And by the way, Letitia, it's when they don't have questions, it's the quality of your presentation that so take it as a compliment.
I'll take that, Neil. Thank you.
I wanted to lead with that so that everybody has that in their mind when they have the opportunity to ask me questions later.
I'm not mad at that at all. So the first question for you, Neil, is it will be time for us all to journey toward a new ERP before we know it. Why is this journey important, and what can we do to prepare during this time?
Yeah. So thank you for that. And you're right. It is upon us. In fact, we have officially kicked off ERP. Now, before everybody panics and says, "What do you mean? Why am I not in the room?" Uh, we will be ERP. Right, is a huge project, and it actually is at its core kind of three different implementations that go into ERP. So you have human resources, you have finance, and then of course you have the student system. And we're going to actually break it into two separate projects and two separate implementations. So what we have kicked off is the HR finance. We're going to combine those together, which isn't uncommon. And we've formed, teams already that have begun strategic level talks. We're not into the weeds yet, around HR and finance implementation. The student system is going to run about a year behind. So what we want to do is to basically get effectively done with HR finance implementation. Then we can shift all of our resources, and of course then bring in student services, to focus on the student system, which is actually significantly larger than HR and finance combined. And that'll be a multi-year implementation. So, with that, teacher, to your point, the reason for this is, and the importance behind it is, we're working off of a system, that was designed at its core, and even though they've made improvements and they've tried to kind of come along, but basically foundationally, we're still working off a system, that we acquired in the 90s. And a lot of us that work with colleague can go on for hours about our gripes about colleague, but really, I think it's important to recognize the college has changed since the late 90s. Our focus has changed. Our strategic goals have changed, since then. And even our underlying reason for why we adopted colleague is different than what we would focus on now in terms of what we want out of our technology. To be perfectly honest, that decision was largely driven by the Y2K. For those of you that, sorry, millennials, you're like, oh, well, what are they talking? But for all the rest of us, there was this big push to put new systems in place at the very end of the 90s because we thought the world was going to end, at midnight, of 1999. And so we focused on different things that we were looking for in our systems back then. The world's changed, technology has changed immensely, and both because of our changes and, to be honest, the inability for that the system we acquired back then to kind of keep up with that. There's just a lot of things we would like to do differently and better that we just can't do, or it's way too difficult to do in our current system. And that's not just for us as employees. For those of you that are on the front lines with students, our students experience that pain as well, right? Because if we're struggling with using the system, they're struggling with it. And we need just something that's a little more modern, something that's more built around the mobile world that we're in. And we spend a lot of time. Hopefully, many of you, definitely many Prof Techs, but hopefully many people on the call were involved in the demos that led to that decision, and we chose Workday. Workday is clearly a very modern system. It was actually started in the 21st century. So when you ask them questions like, well, is it web or mobile friendly? They kind of laugh and they say, we don't know anything different. Our system, the internet existed when we designed our system. So it was designed on day one as a web-based cloud, solution. And so at its core, it's just in a much better position to do the types of things that we want to do. And because of that, it was also designed with the understanding that it needed to be able to talk to other systems. So it does recognize that it's not the kind of the end all of technology. We are going to have other solutions too, and those need to be able to integrate with our ERP. And so it's going to be much easier than our old system to make sure that when we choose to have a separate system for certain functions, that they're still going to talk to one another, and we're going to be able to maximize still the benefits of kind of a single portal and single sign-ons, a single place of kind of source of truth, so to speak. So it's going to be, I'm not saying it's going to solve all our problems. Clearly, some of our problems are just internal. It's how we use technology, not the technology itself. So we have work to do across the board, but it is absolutely going to give us a better platform to solve existing problems, but also to kind of grow going forward, and to be more flexible going forward. This is to me, and I've been asked by Dr. Rhodes to lead this ERP kind of initiative, I guess you can call it. And I view it as one of the single, biggest opportunities we have to kind of influence change in a positive way by being able to have new technology to revisit how we do business, and to look at, is there a better way? If we have a better tool, is there a better way? And I'm really excited about it. Your last kind of question kind of in there, Letitia, was what do we need to do to prepare? At this point, it's really all about getting our minds right. It's being open, trying to get outside of the box. It's a cliche, but it's a cliche for the reason. Colleague has no doubt kind of molded the way we think about how we do business for the last 2 decades. It'll be a little bit of an exercise for many of us, especially for many of us that don't know anything else other than colleague, to kind of see what else can be done. And the best thing we can do about that is to be really open-minded and to try to really think about what we want what do we want the output to be. Don't get caught up immediately in what can the technology do. We'll let them tell us what they can and can't do. We need to start with, what do we want? What would be cool? What would be great? Where are our current pain points? I asked my staff a year ago, start making a note of things that you think are silly. Gosh, it's ridiculous that I have to run this report this way, or that I have to hit this many buttons to make this work. Make a little note of that. There's going to be opportunities at some point, to have conversations about, can we fix that now? So it's really about starting to think about it, thinking about what we're doing, what could we do better? Where do I feel like I spend a lot of time, wrestling with the system, and to make mental notes of that, if not flat out write them down, and be really prepared for the conversations that are going to be coming as we design the new system. Workday, one of the things that's unique about Workday, in their approach, it's all about data and it's all about workflows. So we like the idea of data, that they've really built a system around making sure that we can use data. Because again, they started with, why do you even have a system, right? We have a system so that we can manipulate and collect and use data. They knew that up front, so they designed it to be very powerful as it comes to getting data back out of the system. But what they also did is they recognized is well, a modern system should help you do your job. So they've actually built within the system, they're up to almost 700 business processes that they have um, basically built templates that are customizable. So, right. So if we want to go in and the expectation is, you're now going to have these automated workflows built into the system, which means it's going to kick out automatically the alerts, the reminders, the to-do, the action items, because we're going to configure it as how we want to do business of who needs to approve a transaction, who's to be notified that something's happened. Maybe they don't approve, but they just need to be alerted. And it's going to do all that automatically. But we have to tell it what we want, right? Not program, it's configuration, but we still need to know enough. So again, start thinking through that. How do we do business? What are those things we need to keep? But we're basically going to have to map those processes out because we need to put them into the system. And to be honest, the college doesn't have an institutional way of documenting processes. Now, some of your areas have done really good jobs of doing it, and that's great. You'll be ahead of the game. But a lot of areas don't have documented processes. And you basically can't make Workday work without building a business process. Excuse me. You can't just turn it on and start typing into the system. Everything it does has to have an identified business process. Now, those could be real short and simple processes or very complex ones, but you have to have something in there. So a lot of power is going to be in our hands, but in a lot of our areas, it's going to force us to really sit down and think through how we do business in a way that we haven't done in a very long time. So again, in terms of preparation for that, it's start thinking about that now. So student system, even though it may be disappointing to know that it's still a year before you kind of start, that actually is okay. The student system is going to need a lot more time on the front end in terms of design. So we're not going to wait a year before we start thinking about student system. We're just saying it's going to be a year before we start implementing the system. So what we're going to do is we're kind of getting our feet wet, kind of getting off the ground, but then we're going to be circling back with the student service teams in the coming months and start creating some kind of pre-work for the student side to start really kind of getting into the design. What do we want? How do we want it to work? And that's going to give you a little bit more upfront kind of running room to think through what we want out of the system before we're ready to actually kind of jump in and start implementing. And we thought that was really important for the student side just because of the scale and the complexity of that you probably need a little bit more time to kind of work on what we call the design phase, which is really thinking through all of these different kind of elements. So that's where we're at. And thank you for that question of what can we do to be ready. At this point, it's kind of a psychological exercise. It's getting ready for, and not so much the work. It's really, we want to maximize the opportunity we have with the new technology, which means we really want to revisit how we're doing business. There's a lot of things we do that are great, and we really just will be happy to have a better tool to do them. But there's a lot of things that we probably should do differently. And we'll now have a tool that will help us do that. And we definitely want to capture those along the way. So just start kind of thinking through that. And we'll be meeting with Shasta here pretty soon in fact, we had a meeting scheduled and it got canceled this last week to kind of get her up to speed. She was here at the college, but she wasn't part of the selection. So me and Ahmad, the VP of IT, if you haven't met him, are going to kind of try to get her up to speed on the vision, the timeline, and and Workday in terms of why we chose it. And then with that, we'll segue into her starting to start thinking about her teams and who needs to start kind of putting pencil to paper on all the things we will want to accomplish on the student side. So we'll be the guinea pigs in HR and finance. and the student will be right behind. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Do we have any additional questions about that? I know for me, I haven't gone through this type of change, but I have heard about them. I'm not going to share what I've heard, but I'm curious to see how it's going to go. So if anyone has any questions, chat them in.
ERP is definitely a huge, Dr. Rhodes knows, he's done a few of them. So I'll kind of echo, he has made it clear that this has to be not it will be the institutional priority for the next few years. That doesn't mean that we won't do other things. Obviously, that's not what priority means. But it recognizes that, unfortunately, there's just as many books on failures of ERP conversions as there are successes. But most of them are because there wasn't a true kind of institutional adoption of that initiative. So if we're having those issues in your area, or you're worried about them, we can't start soon enough of trying to, again, get kind of our mind right, because those will become, big barriers to having a successful implementation if we're kind of on the fence. It impacts everything we do. So, we have to be committed and be focused, throughout the entire process, or it will either become just unsuccessful, or it will become incredibly expensive, because you'll find those examples as well. And those tend to go hand in hand, by the way. There's a reason why efficient and effective tend to go in the same sentence a lot.
I can imagine. It doesn't seem like we have any questions, so I'll move on to the next one. Oh,
I'm checking real quick because I think there might be a few.
Yeah, I see one now.
Chat.
Let's see.
Oh, there's some people going ahead and raising their hand that they want to be included. So yeah, absolutely. We want, obviously we need certain leaders to be kind of champions, but the more the merrier, and people that are really engaged and want to participate. Those are definitely the people we want. We want at the table. We want people that are committed to it, that are kind of wanting to look through the right lens, wanting to ask those critical questions of why. It should be a lot of those kids things. Well, why? Well, why? Those are really important questions in a process like this. And so, yeah, absolutely. There's going to be lots of opportunities for participation, and what we're going to need it, because it's a heavy lift, and the more of us that can help with that, then just the better. So,
thank you, Neil. So the second question that I chose from the submissions was: the housing market is doing well in Austin and values are even rising. Since a large portion of our funding comes from property taxes, will this be enough to cover any shortages that the state may not be able to provide if they are experiencing budget issues?
Yeah, no, good question. And that's you're pretty close to right on that kind of assumption. So you're right. At this point, property values seem to be hanging in there. In fact, I was just reading an article in the community impact for Pflugerville, Round Rock, Hutto, and they were talking about how home sales are down a lot, like 15%. But they're talking about the number of homes sold, which obviously there's a lot of people that are just, now's not the time to be changing and moving, so they're not even putting their houses on the market. What that means is there's less homes available. So for those of you that remember kind of the old supply and demand thing, even though demand has probably gone down as well, but supply, so homes aren't getting built as fast and fewer people are putting their homes on the market. So there's fewer homes available out there. So what that means is, since people are still moving to Austin, Texas, prices are being supported by the fact that there's just fewer homes available right now. So that article that said home sales are down 15% said, but oh, by the way, prices are up 5%. So you're exactly right. Now we get property values our tax roll, property revenue, sorry, are actually driven by two things. One is property values. Are the homes and properties, commercial properties that are here, worth more this year than last year? But also, we get more property taxes because there are new properties, more properties, right? So you take an old cornfield and you turn it into a bunch of homes or commercial properties. You now have new properties on the tax roll. So we want to watch both of them. Yes, it's good to hear that home values are hanging in there at the moment, but are they also building as many homes? And so there's both pieces of that equation. But right now we're doing okay. But I think that's also because right now people are kind of working off the assumption that this is a kind of still a relatively short term kind of bump in the road. And I hope they're right. And we still have some time for that to be the case. But the longer this goes on, then the more risk we are that it gets into a deeper and lasting recession. And that's the concern. So as I told the trustees on multiple occasions, including last week when they adopted our budget, we do not have a current budget problem, and that's good. I want to make sure we all know that there's no reason to panic. The current budget is fine, and at this point, I cannot point to something and say we have lost this revenue or we have this problem because it doesn't exist yet. But we are concerned that we will have some issues in the future, but it's the uncertainty that is kind of making us want to be cautious. We do know that the state is struggling and is going to continue to struggle. We will know more in the next few months. In fact, we may know a little bit more in any day now. We're waiting for the comptroller. The comptroller normally puts out a quarterly report in July. The state comptroller. And that's a really important report, both because of what's going for the state's current economic condition, but that is also the report that comes out right before the state kicks off their budget process for the next legislative session, which starts in January. So it influences that. So if the comptroller comes out with a relatively scary report, it is going to cause the legislative budget board to want to have a very pessimistic view on the upcoming legislative process, which means when they ask for us to submit our appropriation request, which normally would be going on right now, it feels like they've kind of delayed it a little bit. This is where they'll say you're going to start with 5% less, 10% less, whatever the number is when you make your request. That will be informative to us. It will give us a sense of where the state thinks they're going to be next year. We will have that type of information any day now. We're waiting to see that. After that point, we probably won't hear anything more from the state in an official capacity until next January when they kick off the legislative session. January is also the magic date for setting the tax values for the next year. It's January 1. That's the date that they take that snapshot. So we're going to learn a little bit here, basically this month and next, about the state. And then we'll learn a whole lot more in January, both about the state and property values. And so those are kind of the key dates that we're kind of keeping an eye on. Hopefully things aren't as bad as they feel like they could be. The board has made it clear that they are not just willing, but expecting to revisit the budget a few times along those key dates. And as soon as we get what's hopefully good news that makes us feel comfortable about the longer term revenue stream, then both they have said and the administration, to be clear, has also said that we will absolutely be considering kind of opening the purse strings and revisiting the discussion on compensation, along with some other decisions that were kind of deferred. To your point, Letitia, of to what degree can we be hopeful that property taxes will offset state cuts, you're absolutely right. Property taxes make up over 60% of our funding. The state only makes up about 15%. So it's completely possible that some relatively good news from property taxes can kind of overcome any shortcomings in state funding. Just kind of mathematically, it could work out that way. But it's also important to recognize that the state, I don't think the state can cut us enough to kind of have a detrimental impact on how we do business. But they can absolutely cut us enough to where it reduces kind of our discretionary revenue stream to fund new things, including raises. So there's going to be kind of state cuts will hurt in that. It's reducing those new dollars that we otherwise would have. But I'm not worried about the state cutting us to the extent that it forces us to revisit, operations of the college, or anything like that. I'm more worried about that with property taxes, that if we end up in a lasting recession and we get to where there's little to no growth in property taxes or even declines, that will be, very challenging for us to deal with, because it puts us in a position where the only other thing we control is tuition. So you kind of get into this, are we going to revisit how we do business? Are we going to increase tuition, or the combination thereof? And those are really hard decisions either way, right? So it's kind of choose your poison at that point. But the state is more of an issue of, do they reduce our money that we'd otherwise have that would be discretionary to do new things, including give raises. So we're just going to keep monitoring. But the good news is we're in a good position to the pain that we're talking about feeling is all the new things we would like to do that we may not have money. That's a different pain than can we continue to at least do what we're already doing. And that's a good spot to be in. So I think we can feel relatively comfortable at this point, especially since we're kind of trying to stay in front of this, that we can maintain current operations. We don't have to have conversations about furloughs and layoffs, but yeah, we're absolutely hopeful that we'll have enough money to actually do some new stuff, including, maybe give some raises. It's just a little too early to tell. But what we don't absolutely want to do is to kind of get out in front of our skis, so to speak, give some nice raises, and then 6 months from now or a year from now, be talking about how we wind that back, saying, oops, we really can't afford what we did. We're either going to rescind those raises, or you're talking about, because everybody got 2%, I need to let go of 2% of the people. And a lot of entities work that way, by the way. So, it's not to say it's right or wrong. It's just been that historically, and at least from the leadership's perspective, we don't want that to be our philosophy. We want to err on the side of keeping those FTEs that we have. And if that means that, we don't get raises for a year, or they're smaller than we otherwise would have had, we kind of would rather have that scenario than the one of, we'll give raises, and if we have to lay people off, so be it. So that's just where we're at. I'm happy to take any questions on that. I do want to reiterate that we're in a good spot now. There's no reason to panic. It's just we're also recognizing that we want to be as cautious as we can be, because there's still a lot of uncertainty in the world. And we want to wait as long as we can to make any kind of critical decisions that are going to have long-term impacts. Hopefully we will have better information sooner than later that we can make those longer-term decisions on.
Thank you, Neil. And I appreciate, and I've told you all this before, I appreciate our leadership and our administration in that knowing the consequences that are possible and acknowledging the security of the employees is more important. So I commend you all for making that decision. And I think, me personally, that's the same thing that I would have done.
Yeah.
So I
Well, and
appreciate
I'll say, and thank you for your support. I mean, the employee associations have generally been, all of them, and especially the PropTech Association, have been supportive of this. You could absolutely make um, our all of our lives, the people that are having to make these types of decisions, more difficult, and you haven't done that. And so I appreciate your understanding, your support. I think it's a good kind of recognition that we're kind of all in this together. The administration, you know, Rhodes, and you're probably gonna hear from him again here in a little bit. He truly, if you know Rhodes, when he speaks with passion, and he is so, you know, proud of all the hard work. So there's absolute recognition. If there was ever a year where the ACC employees deserved a raise, it's this year. So we don't, you know, we are absolutely would love to be able, you know, to give, you know, a raise. Um, but, you know, we're also want to make sure that we can take care of y'all next year too. So, you know, hopefully we get some good news and we can kind of open that up um, here in the coming months. And the administration has made it clear that we were prepared, you know, to recommend at least a 3% raise. So there's no opposition from the administration. We would love to be able to give the employees a raise. And as soon as we're sure we have the dollars to do that, we'll be the first ones going to the board and pushing that agenda. So we do appreciate all the work. We appreciate the support from all the employee associations. You know, the faculty senate, you know, also understood, you know, that, and they recognized that now is not probably the time to do a raise, and that definitely helps with that, right? So we do appreciate it.
Oh, no problem at all. I do want to go into the next question. Can you provide us an update on the Pinnacle campus and other construction projects going around across the district?
Yeah. So what I'll just more broadly speak to, and in fact, I think you mentioned it, Letitia, and that we just sent out a nice picture of the Highland parking garage, which is one of many Highland projects that are on similar timelines. So Highland is kind of rocking along as it has been. Been a little bit of bumps in the road because of COVID, but you know we're still making through there. So at Highland, you know, the garage is basically done. It'll actually come online in phases. The north end of the garage, which is closest, you know, to the campus, is basically ready to go right now. The south end, they're still doing work inside of that, and it'll come technically online in a couple of months. So the structure's there, but there's stuff we're working on inside, getting all the technology hooked up. And so we'll kind of phase in the garage. Highland 2000 building is basically complete structurally. We've had some delays on getting kind of furniture and equipment moved in, just because of everybody that makes that stuff has been impacted by COVID too, right? So there's just been a series of stuff not getting manufactured on time. Then it's manufactured, but you can't get it delivered. Then you get it delivered, and can you actually accomplish social distancing by having a bunch of people in a 100 square foot office trying to assemble modular furniture? You know, so we've had some challenges through. But if you went and looked at it right now, other than some landscaping and some aesthetics, it's basically done. And we just got good news that we got our hospital beds for the simulation lab. Those were actually commandeered a couple of times by the hospitals. So our orders kept getting kind of prioritized, and rightfully so. But we finally did get those in. So we're making good progress. Our original plan, as I'm sure most, if not all of you know, was to open for the fall. That's not going to happen. But guess what? We weren't going to be doing classes in there in the fall anyways because of COVID. So it kind of lined up okay. So we're now really preparing to, if COVID allows, but the building will be ready and the spaces will be ready to operate for the spring semester at Highland. We also have the Building 3000 project right there next door, which is the old women's Dillard's, which will primarily house administration, but it's also where the KLRU and the ACC TV will be housed. Making good progress on that. I don't know if y'all have gone over there. There's actually walls back again. You know, that was that steel and concrete structure for a couple of years, just sitting there as an eyesore. We've got not just walls, we've got glass. So basically the external of that building is starting to look, you know, like a real building. And again, now we're kind of making our way to the inside of that building. It will also be opened up in phases with kind of KLRU and ACC TV starting to move in later this fall and into probably January. KLRU's hoping to start operations in January. They were supposed to start this September, but they themselves have been impacted very much by what's going on. You know, they are very leveraged to events like Austin City Limits. So they've had to also kind of revisit kind of their business model and their timelines. So they're now going to come in January. And then we're just basically kind of going floor by floor after that. They're coming in the first floor and in the studio. Then we'll bring the second floor in kind of March, April, and third floor. We'll just kind of fill that building up 4x4 with basically the idea that we'll be fully moved in sometime next summer. So basically between January and the summer, we will be moving in to that building. Of course, at that point, Highland 2000 will also be up and running. The parking garage will be fully open. So basically all of the existing Highland projects will be complete. From a construction standpoint, really by the end of this calendar year. And boy, does that site now look completely different, right, than it did when it was just a mall. The city of Austin also has a major building. It's actually done. They're actually moving in right now. So that's on over there next to the old House of Torment. That's not ours, that's them, the city of Austin, but it's getting occupied right now. Of course, they're also kind of rethinking how they occupy a building during COVID, but you can see that building. It's actually a very handsome, you know, building, and definitely has kind of a added value to our whole site there. So Highland is definitely moving. Rio Grande is right behind it. We've actually haven't had very many delays at Rio Grande, COVID related. That team has been able to stay safe. And so they've had very few kind of work stoppages. The goal for Rio Grande was to be able to start occupying that building in the spring and possibly even have some classes in the spring. We went ahead and put it off. We're not going to do any classes in the spring. Again, that was really more of a COVID. The building will be there, will be ready. So we will start being able to move people in the spring. And so that'll be, you know, student services is kind of moving back, reoccupying those. Faculty could start moving in to get ready for the summer session. But I don't know if you've looked at it too, but the exterior of that building is pretty much done. Definitely got some good kind of power washing in a sense. All new windows. It definitely looks much cleaner. Let's say we had to maintain the historical perspective, so we couldn't redesign the exterior. But I think you'll find that it looks much more pleasant than it did before we started. And the inside is just going to be incredible because it's going to be state of the art on the inside. So you're going to have this really cool kind of historical architecture, but on the inside, the spaces are going to be, you know, cutting edge. So you're going to have this really cool kind of blend of old and new at that. And so that also will be, you know, done at the end of this calendar year. We're supposed to have a occupancy certificate, you know, in December. I'm ready to go. And a bigger scale, which will lead me to the question about Pinnacle. We're also, along with all of this, we are completely updating what we call campus master plan. So this is basically the district-wide facilities master plan. That's been an ongoing project since last summer. It's actually pretty much done, except we're kind of waiting to get in the queue for when we can start presenting this kind of final draft to the Board of Trustees, to other leadership groups. So the work is done. But again, because of the shifting of priorities of COVID and other types of things, we just haven't been able to kind of get in front of everybody with it. uh, but it basically went back through all of our campuses and is kind of updating. Some of them already had relatively update the newer campuses, but kind of updating those master plans in terms of what they can be. You know, what are the issues we have, and how could we resolve them, and how much can they grow at each location. So we're going to have that here pretty soon. Kind of these new visions for each of the campuses, which includes adding the vacant land at Southeast Travis over by the airport. It will now have a master plan, and creating a new master plan for Pinnacle, which was the question. So right now for Pinnacle, right, it's been decided that we are not reusing the existing building. In theory, we could put, I think we came up with a number of somewhere between 30 and $50 million into that building, and to bring it up to code and to deal with a lot of its mechanical challenges and issues. But oh, by the way, we would still be trying to operate a campus in a 1980s Class B office building. And that still, so after we spent 40, $50 million on it, we would still have some of the functional limitations of that building that we have historically had. So it was decided by the board that that's not the best path forward. And that's still the decision. So the question then becomes, is what can we do? You know, I say luckily, but it was good decision making many years ago that we owned about 50 acres next door to that building. So really our focus is, which is being identified in these campus master plans. So here any day now, we'll have stuff we can release for people to look at in terms of those plans. We will show what we can do to replace that building next door on the 50 acres we own. Now we'll need money still. That's still going to be $50 million. But it'll be $50 million going into something that's actually designed as a college campus, a 21st century college campus, as opposed to $50 million to try to make lemonade, you know, with the building that's there. So you'll see those plans. And again, they're concepts, but they're showing what could be done on the space given, you know, building code and everything else, you know, there. And then we really then need the board to make that a priority and to find out a way to go raise some money so that we can go build something, you know, there. So the timing of doing that is all really on contingent. There's different ways we can do it, but the most obvious and realistic way is we're really talking about the college going out and having another tax bond election to fund projects of that scale. And so that's very much in the board's domain. They'll be getting here pretty soon those master plans, and there's a natural segue then to say, okay, well, what do we need to do to go do these wonderful things that this master plan shows? And Pinnacle's one of them on the list. So we'll kind of see where that goes from there. So, you know, we haven't forgotten about Pinnacle. We have some wonderful opportunities because we happen to have quite a bit of land there. We're happy to know that the state has finally decided to invest in the road infrastructure there. So that project's actually up and running. It's funded. It's a TxDOT project for them to finally go and expand 290 out through the Y. That will be very beneficial to the future of that campus. So we're happy to see that work going on. There's definitely, we can definitely do some really cool things on that land out there. It's a little bit limited because you have really restrictive building limitations because it's over, because it's in the recharge zone of the aquifer. And the topography is really interesting there. I don't know if you've really gone out and walked that, but there's some pretty steep climbs there that you may not realize. But those also lend themselves to doing something really, really kind of cool. Really designing something around that geography. I think we could have a really special kind of campus there if the board is kind of inclined to put the money into it. They have expressed their support for that, so I don't have any reason to think that they won't. They've been very vocal that they want to still have an ACC presence there at that site, and we're going to bring them some plans that show that they can do something really really cool there. So we'll see where that goes. But that does mean that we're talking years. Um, you know, to be realistic, we're talking years before you're going to see anything physical, at that location again. So it just takes that long to build things.
Right. Thank you, Neil. I think that's great, and I really just wanted to update because of everything that did happen with Pinnacle. So I think everyone's satisfied to hear that.
Yeah.
One last question before you go, and this is in regard to the video that you made with Jessica Vest. Would you consider doing periodic updates, at least during this time of so much uncertainty with Jessica Vest? I thought that there was so much positive feedback from that one video that I think everyone would like to see more of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So thanks for bringing it up, and thanks for letting me know that it actually was useful. Not that someone just watched it, but that they actually found it. So I'll definitely reach out to. That was actually kind of initiated to give them all the credit, by Brett and Jessica and the OCM team. It wasn't. I don't want to act like it was my idea. But hearing that, I'm happy to reach out to them and say, hey, let's do another round of it. Obviously, we have some updated information from back when we did it back then, and so it makes sense that we can go do kind of a version 2.0 of that. And then it'll make sense to probably do that here again later this fall as we learn more and have some of these other budget discussions with the board. So absolutely, whatever's useful to people, then I definitely want to help do my part for that.
And there are some questions in the chat. Let's see. Lauren Lewis mentioned how she really appreciated your candor in the video, and I think a lot of people did. One thing that I acknowledge and I appreciate, Neil, when it comes to you is that you're very transparent. And I think that a lot of staff members and faculty members in the same sense really appreciate that. We do want to know what's going on. So being transparent in that manner is very helpful.
Good. No, I appreciate that. Thank you for that feedback. And it's good to hear that it comes across that way, because it's absolutely my intent. I believe it's fundamental to what we do, but I actually think it's fundamental to my job. As the CFO of a public institution and a taxpayer also supported institution, that I take that very seriously. I think one of the primary parts of my job is to help ensure that there's transparency in obviously the fiscal part, but just more broadly in how we operate and the decisions that are made. And I'd have to deal with auditors all the time, so I'm used to it. I expect to have to be audited, on the decisions we make. So therefore, I'm used to it. I'm okay with throwing it out there, and I expect people to kind of hold me accountable and to kind of question, that. So I'm glad that it comes across that way, because it's absolutely my philosophy and it's my intent is to get it out there. And if people have a question, I want them to at least have information. They can decide whether it's an answer, but I'll at least share everything I know about it. So good.
Thank you. We appreciate
I'm reading through some of these. It looks like some of these might kind of get in the weeds, and they may be hard to, with the time we have to answer.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that this is a question. I did send you the spreadsheet of the questions that were submitted. That way, if you wanted to later on or provide a Q&A to answer those questions, you could. But that question, James, I do know may be very detailed.
It is, but at its broader sense. So please send those forward, because this may be some good feedback on what is our process for getting feedback, right? I mean, so even though this one's getting into a very product specific, we should absolutely have that, right? we're going to go out and make decisions. At some point, people get paid to make decisions, and that's okay. We should always have a process for evaluating, right? You try things, we evaluate, we learn, we adjust, right? And it's a cycle of that. And so I can't speak specifically to these products, but I do hear within that question of, but what is the process by which we do those evaluations and we get, good and real feedback on what's working and what's not. And darn, we're going to need a lot of that in ERP, right? Because we want to take full advantage of the opportunity, to improve those as part of ERP. But the only way we can improve it is if we know there's something that needs to be improved, which means we need those, whether they be data or other types of feedback, which then becomes data. Absolutely. So I hear you, and that's great. And I will, for my part, there's actually a lot of people that would have to be involved in that in terms of leadership. But I will definitely circle back and see to what degree we actually have a mechanism to do that, which is a good question.
Thank you, Neil. We do appreciate your time and everything all the work that you're doing. And thank you for answering those questions. You were very thorough, and I hope that everyone got a better sense of what's going on. We really appreciate you, Neil. Thank you.
Very good. No, well, thank y'all. Hey, I appreciate it. I see Dr. Rhodes is here. I might hang on for a little bit and just keep an eye on him. So if that's okay.
I'm sure
I'll be
he
quiet
will.
because I've got another call I've got to get on too. So I'll be multitasking. So.
Thank you, Neil.
All right. Thank y'all.
Hi, Dr. Rhodes. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Good. So, nice to see you.
It's great to see you all. And Neil is going to correct me whenever I say something wrong.
I'm sure he will. I do want to start out with, again, thanking you for your leadership. As always, like I always say at the board meetings, I think the administration and your cabinet are doing a great job. Thank you for being so sincere to the employees of ACC as well as the students and your dedication to everything that we have going on. I think that we have a great leadership team, and I am most appreciative of all of you. I do want to jump into the questions because I know you're a busy guy, so I don't want to keep you too long. So the first question is, what plans or considerations will the college have for working parents if schools and daycares are closed for the rest of the calendar year?
Yeah, that's one that, ever since the middle of March, not knowing what COVID is going to be like and how long it's going to extend. And, we keep learning day by day new information about it. But, what we've said since the beginning is if the work can be done at home, that's where we want it to take place during this time, especially as COVID continues to spike. It hasn't let off. And so we will continue, and it looks like through the fall semester under the same guidance that we want to make sure that our faculty, our staff, and our students are safe, healthy, in secure environments. And so, we'll continue on the same path that we're on right now and do as much from home as possible. One thing on that too, when you're talking about parents and having kids at home, I've got 4 kids of my own, and they all have kids, and they're all at home now, and so they're having, they are the superintendent of their family school. They're the principal, the assistant principal, the teacher, and the counselor, all wrapped up into one family unit. And so I know, I see it on Zoom calls and WebEx calls and so forth, that there's a great need there. And so we at ACC, we keep that in mind, that families are critical, they're important. And so we've got to make sure that we do everything that's possible to make sure that families are in safe environments and that the work can be done at home.
Thank you. I appreciate that because my kids are home, and even though I'd rather be at campus, the thing with keeping them safe as well as myself safe are the most important things. I'm sure all of the PropTech employees would agree when it comes to that. So we greatly appreciate that.
One
Mhm.
that I'll add before we leave that is actually Matthew Dowdy, one of our deans, had just sent me an email this morning, and he's doing something kind of unique. It's called Support for Parents of Online Learners, and they're having a teacher tips and tricks session online on Sunday, August the 9th from 1 to 5. On which they'll have some different faculty members talking about those tips, because that is hard for parents as we see that most of our school systems are going to delay and have most of it online to begin with. They say through September, I think it's 8th or 9th or something. I think it's probably going to last longer than that. It's important that we get this type of information out to parents, and especially, our own faculty and staff parents.
I agree. Thank you for that information, and we'll make sure that we get that out to all the PropTech community tomorrow when Courtney sends out her weekly update. So we appreciate that. The second question that was submitted for you was, it has been said, never let a good crisis go to waste. What innovations or opportunities do you hope ACC achieves during this time of uncertainty?
The first thing is that we capture lessons learned along the way, and that we don't just make movement and leave it behind and not learn from what we've done. So the first thing is continuously capturing what works and what does not work. And I think some of the surprises is the speed of implementation and conversion that transpired with our faculty and our staff in going from face-to-face delivery of education and support services to all of a sudden all virtual delivery of education and delivery of the support services necessary to make sure that our students are successful. That really happened during a 2-week period. And we can always improve upon, because it was a crash course really in making that happen. And so I couldn't be, as president, number one, I couldn't be more proud of our faculty and our staff and the way that they made that happen, keeping the students as the center point, the focal point of that transition. That I am so proud of all of our faculty and staff and what's going on. So the speed of implementation, we probably have all of our faculty now using Blackboard. That probably would have been a 2-year process to get there. It happened in 2 weeks. Things like getting hotspots on all of our campuses happened within about a 3-month period. That probably would have been a 2 to 3 year journey to get something like that to happen. And so learning, as you said, Letitia, never waste a crisis. Things are happening so fast that it has amazed me. But there's other things too that we're finding out. Efficiencies in meetings, kind of like we're doing today, is think about the lost travel time and people going to meetings from campuses or from homes and so forth, and the amount of time that's spent in the car, in transportation. And so the efficiencies that we're seeing, and we can always improve upon some of these things too, but the efficiencies of virtual communication is incredible. The institutional sharing that is taking place now is at an all-time high, I would have to say. That faculty and staff are helping each other so that the end result, the delivery of education to our students, is better. And one of the surprising things that came out of the spring semester, we had 30% fewer drops in this spring semester than we did a year ago when we had face-to-face. And so questions are, why did that happen? What caused that? And there are some things that we can probably go back and say may have caused some of that, but we also have to contact students and find out what kept them on course, what kept them in college when they signed up for face-to-face delivery of education and ended up with virtual online education. So what were the cause factors that allowed them to stay in? And so there's a number that we're hearing back from students. One is the communication that happened from advisors and faculty actually contacting students and having that constant communication with students. And so that is probably, I would say, and just listening to, I'll give you an example, my next door neighbor. So her daughter attends ACC. And so the other day I was out walking and I saw her and her daughter, and I stopped him and I said, so what happened during the spring semester that worked well? And the first thing that she said is the contact from my advisors, keeping in touch with me, letting me know, what was going on and how, and tips on how I could be more successful. And she also said, and she used this word, the grace of the faculty in my course, and understanding that I was struggling and helping me understand that they're there to help me be successful. So those things, I think, also when we decided to do the pass no pass, gave some students some comfort that, I signed up for face-to-face and I'm good at that. I don't know about this online stuff. And understanding that they could finish the course and not impact their GPA was good to hear. Some of the other things that I think came out of that is transportation. One of the reasons why a lot of our students have to withdraw is because work schedules were changing or something else happened, and they had to drop out of school because they just couldn't keep up with the demand of transportation and work and home. And so seeing some of that actually take place too, I think caused it. So getting that feedback from students, learning from that as to what helped them and what works well, I think is going to put us in a much better position. Other things I would say is a better understanding of our ecosystem, regional ecosystem, better and closer communication with all of our partners that include the city, the county, especially when we talk about the health feedback, the information back from health providers, the information, the exchange and the dialogue with our K-12 partners, with business and industry, with the nonprofits that we work with, has been stronger during this period of time than ever before. So we're working better. But I would also say on a statewide and national basis, there had become an intense communication so that people could learn from each other like never before. And so through the Texas Association of Community Colleges, the American Association of Community Colleges, the League for Innovation that we're a member of, we had constant communication, 2 to 3 calls per week to learn from each other as to what's happening and how we're dealing with it. And so we can share those promising practices. And so that is a new learning experience, I think, for all of us. we learned that we can be flexible, we can be agile, we can respond to the needs and the crises that happened. Uh, this is like no other time, I don't think, in history, because we got hit with 4 crises at once. It started with COVID, so a health crisis that soon, as it lasted longer, it transformed into an economic crisis. So we have health and economic crisis. And because of the stay at home, which is for safety purposes, you all of a sudden begin to see an social emotional crisis that's happening, because a lot of people feel isolated and they don't have that communication, that contact that's necessary. And then we saw the racial injustice as a crisis, and it became the perfect storm where everything hit us all 4 at once. And so, how do you deal with that? How do we deal with that as a college? We're learning greatly how to deal with that. So I know it's a long response to that, but it's and communication, better ways to communicate. That it couldn't be any more important to make sure that we're constantly communicating. We can never communicate enough. We're finding better ways, hopefully, to communicate with each other and to communicate out across the college family.
I agree, Dr. Rhodes. And you touched a lot on the third question that I had for you, so I'll just ask the last piece of it. What do you anticipate will be the biggest challenge for our students for the upcoming academic year? And will the changes we have made permanently affect how we operate and provide services in the future?
Yes, it will definitely permanently influence the delivery of education and support services for the future. Number one is professional development is going to help everyone become better at the utilization of technology in the delivery of education and support services. We're all learning that as we go. So that's one aspect of it. I would also say that we have probably every faculty member now who understands the utilization of technology and delivery, but we also as a college understand that the digital divide in our community still exists. We felt that before pre-COVID, we kind of knew there was still a digital divide, but we didn't know the extent until we had to go completely online. So that we now know that large numbers of our students did not have access to the technology, either the hardware or the connectivity, the broadband connectivity. And so one of the things coming out of this is, how can we as a college look for better ways to work with partners outside of the college to make sure that we make that a priority as to the delivery of education. And so, that's one thing we've got to continue to work on is the biggest, it's one thing to get hotspots and allow students to drive onto campus and be able to access the internet from the parking lot. But that's not the most desirable environment for students to have access and to learn and to do their homework and so forth. And so how do we look at partnerships with broadband providers to make sure that we can get that out to faculty, staff, and students?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my mute button. Thank you, Dr. Rhodes, for answering that. The last question is, many staff members share office space. Sometimes 2 or more people are in one space. And some staff members are out in the open where students wait to be seen. Most offices of the staff members who work face-to-face with students are not big enough to ensure physical distancing. What is the criteria for determining who must return to campus and who can continue to provide services remotely for as long as necessary?
I would have to be very open and honest with you right now. We don't know the best. We're learning on a daily basis, and we appears that we're going to need to keep most of the campuses primarily closed during the fall semester, and essential personnel, and we'll keep it, as minimal as possible to be on campus. We will have, I think, in the second summer session, we have about somewhere close to 1,000 students who are taking some courses that there has to be some face-to-face, such as in welding, auto tech, and some of those programs, CTE programs. But we're making sure that the protocols are put in place and that people abide by those protocols, including wearing masks, taking temperatures before entering buildings, filling out the questionnaire. And so we've got to stay steadfast with those protocols going in. During the fall semester, I think the numbers of students probably will be somewhere close to 2,000 that will have some face-to-face. But I've asked that even if there has to be some face-to-face, that it's a hybrid. It's not entirely face-to-face, that it needs to be hybrid to where 50% must be online, and 50% could be in person, but we will stand firm with the protocols necessary to, try our best to protect our faculty, staff, and students.
Thank you, Dr. Rhodes. And that's the last question that I have for you. Is there anything that you would like to share with us? Any updates or anything to that matter?
We learn from each other. And so I want to hear from you. I like to hear from our faculty and our staff. I like to hear from our students about what's working. You're in the environment, you see it, you hear it, you feel it. And so we need to hear back what we can do better together to make this the best possible environment for all of us. And so I need to hear from you. This is like a 360 degree information sharing that we've got to share with each other. You hear from students, you hear from other employees about what's working and what's not. And we only get better when we share that information. And I also want to stress, and I'll open it up for questions too, but I also want to stress how proud I am of you all for what you've done, for hanging in there, for making it a priority that our students receive what they need, and that you have gone above and beyond during this time of crisis, that it seems like we really come together as a family when we're faced with a crisis like this. And that has been so evident in this time. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rhodes. And I think James has a question. James, do you want to unmute yourself and ask Dr. Rhodes your question?
Yes, Dr. Rhodes. My name is James Blankenship. I work in the Learning Labs. We've had an online tutoring system, there's been a strange, I don't know if it's an anomaly, where labs that were busy are now no longer busy, and labs that were not busy are now busy. We've asked inquiries, but there's no transparency as to why this is happening. We're not getting any feedback, and it's creating a lot of anxiety among an increasing number of people who work in the labs about why this is and why we can't get any feedback about how this ticket allocation system is set up. Is that something people are aware of at HBC, or is this the first time you're hearing about it?
I would have to say that this is the first time I'm hearing it. So by learning labs by campus are changing, or is it by subject type areas?
It seems to be by campus. Labs that used to get a lot of tutoring requests when it was in person are now no longer getting those tutoring requests. And labs that got very few visits are now getting a lot of tutoring requests. And since there is no class or home campus anymore, there's a lot of confusion about why certain learning lab campuses are getting a disproportionate amount of tickets.
Yeah.
And that makes people who are at the smaller campuses, it makes them nervous that something is going on, but there's been very little communication from the upper level to the people who are actually working with the students on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. So do you know how those learning lab requests come in from students?
I know they come in through Freshdesk, but as I said, we're more talked to, and there's not a whole lot of transparency or explanation of how the system was set up.
Okay. I'll make a note of that and follow up. So thank you, James.
Thank you.
And Dr. Rhodes, Dr. Lauren Siebel made a comment. She says the care and concern that you and the administration have shown over these last few months has done so much for the morale of APTE members. And I want to second that. I think that everything that has been changing so fast, that we really needed the leadership that you and your team have shown. So we really do appreciate that. And I do believe that it has raised the morale for APTE members as well.
I hope. Yeah.
Any other questions for Dr. Rhodes, anyone?
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
When are you going to hi, Dr. Rhodes, when are you going to take some vacation?
You know, I did get to take a week.
Good.
And we went to the mountains in Utah. And, you know, one of the hard parts about this COVID is, you know, we have 4 kids, 9 grandkids. And, you know, we used to get to see them all the time. And now we don't. And so that, you know, other than through FaceTime, you know, and we've had a couple of Friday evening Zoom family meetings to where we get all the grandkids and all of the kids and us together on a Zoom call. And that really helps. But to not be able to see your grandkids in person has been one of the hard parts. But we did get to, my wife and I got to go to the mountains in Utah for a week and got to see one of our grandkids and my daughter. So thank you, Lauren.
Excellent.
Neil said, when can he take his vacation?
He says 20 years.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rhodes. Thank you, Neil. We really do appreciate you guys for joining us today. And y'all made this meeting a success. Nicole, do you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, don't believe a word that Neil says about not taking vacations.
Thank you all. It was nice to see everyone. And for everyone that needs to reach APTE, you know how to do so. If you don't, we'll send out, Courtney will send out our weekly update tomorrow. But we do appreciate everyone. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
It's so good to see everyone's faces. I miss y'all.
I know.
Miss you too, Nicole.
Oh, and here comes Zoe. Bye, guys.